All right, let's talk about Family Guy Season 21, Episode 11. You know, sometimes I look at this show and I wonder if Seth MacFarlane just walks into the writing room, slaps a cue card on the wall that says, "Make it like Castaway, but gay," and then goes back to counting his money. Because that's what this episode felt like. They literally put the Family Guy theme song in, like a whole other version of it, which is usually a sign they're either running on fumes or they have a really good idea they want to tease. Turns out, it was more the former. The whole premise of this episode, or at least the first half, is Joe Swanson telling a story that is basically a carbon copy of Castaway. And I'm not talking about a subtle nod. I'm talking about him saying Federal Express approximately 50 times and getting stranded on an island with a volleyball named Wilson. It's like they saw the movie, thought, man, that was a bit too serious, and decided to make it into a convoluted setup for Quagmire's first love story. And let me tell you, Quagmire's first love story is a journey. It's a journey that involves bad aviation, fantasy football, and a woman who apparently prioritized a Mad About You reboot over him. We'll get to all that. But first, can we just acknowledge how bizarre it is that the show is opening with a whole musical number about good old-fashioned values and then immediately dives into a story about Quagmire's sexual exploits and Joe's, well, we'll get to Joe's. It's like they set a trap for you, promising a warm-hearting tale and then bam, it's all weirdness and callbacks. This episode is basically a test to see if you're still paying attention or if you've just got it on in the background while you're doing laundry. And let me tell you, there are some moments in here that will make you question everything you thought you knew about these characters and possibly about aviation safety. Stick around because things get truly unhinged when Joe starts talking about his own first love. You are not ready for what comes next. Hey, if you're enjoying this deep dive into one of Family Guy's more unique episodes, do us a solid and hit that subscribe button. It really helps us keep these videos coming. And hey, maybe it'll inspire the Family Guy writers to actually put out an episode as interesting as this breakdown. So, the episode kicks off with that classic Family Guy intro, but with a twist. It's like they took the original theme song, sprinkled it with existential dread and a dash of "Are we phoning it in?" and served it up as a commentary on society. We've got the violence in movies and sex on TV, the longing for good old-fashioned values, and then, of course, lucky there's a Family Guy. It's all very meta and very Family Guy. But then the actual plot unfolds. Peter rushes in late, claiming a family emergency involving Chris. He wasn't even listening, which is peak Peter. He's told to just sit down and drink beer and tell him about it, which is basically an invitation for a convoluted story. And it is convoluted. Apparently, Chris and his girlfriend broke up because she wanted to see other people. This leads to some truly bizarre dialogue where Joe is having eye surgery and Peter, mistaking him for Colin Farrell, reacts with confusion and then some very aggressive British slang. It's a weird little detour, but it's mostly there to set up Joe's main story. He's talking about his eyesight being restored, and somehow this leads to the breakup of Chris and his girlfriend. It's this kind of disconnected logic that you either love or hate about Family Guy. The show doesn't care if things make sense, it cares if they're funny, or at least if they're trying to be funny. And then Joe launches into his tale. He says the doctor is going to restore his eyesight, and Peter's reaction is just fantastic. He goes, "What?" And then when Joe explains, Peter's response is a stunned, "Oh no." It's like he's genuinely upset that Joe might be able to see clearly again. And then the Colin Farrell thing comes out of nowhere. Peter asks if Joe is happy, and then says, "Oh no, oh no, but I thought you'd be happy, Colin Farrell." And then Joe, channeling his inner, well, I guess his inner Irish guy who thinks he's Colin Farrell, says, "Oi, blimey, get stuffed. I'm going to see other birds. Good day, mate." It's utterly nonsensical, but that's the charm, right? It's the kind of dialogue that makes you rewind and say, did he really just say that? The episode then tries to justify this detour by mentioning that Chris was sobbing his eyes out over his breakup, and Peter abruptly left. This is where the idea of first loves always hit the hardest is introduced, and it's the perfect springboard for Joe to tell his own story. He claims he still remembers his first real love, and it makes everything feel shimmery and distorted. This is the bridge to the Castaway parody. He talks about working for Federal Express, just like Tom Hanks. And yes, he says Federal Express a suspicious number of times. It's a clear signal that this whole section is going to be a big fat spoof. He even uses his job to get a free iced tea refill, asking for it the way Federal Express delivers parcels. It's such a forced callback, but again, that's the Family Guy way. He then reveals his fiancée was Helen Hunt. Yes, Helen Hunt. And the reactions from Peter and Quagmire are priceless. Joe just looks dreamily at a picture, and Peter says, "Hubba hubba." Quagmire agrees. Darn right, hubba hubba. The joke here is that Quagmire has a thing for most women, but Joe's appreciation for Helen Hunt is on another level. He's clearly projecting his own desires onto Joe's story. He then goes on to describe his dream girlfriend, and the joke is that he's describing a pissy bird, which is Quagmire's usual type, but then he clarifies that he was living the dream with Helen. It's a nice little jab at Quagmire's character, while setting up Joe's own romantic narrative. Joe is obsessed with time, 17 seconds late for work, and it's established that his fiancée Helen is also very time-conscious. She kisses him and calls him a time-obsessed beardless man who is unable to spear a fish with a sharpened stick. This is foreshadowing, obviously. Joe can't spear fish. It's a running gag that will come back later. Quagmire tells Joe to remember all that stuff for later, which is his typical lecherous way of saying he's interested in the romantic details, or probably just the sex. Joe then talks about 3 more days until the wedding and his last flight across the plane crash sea. This is where things take a sharp left turn into castaway territory. He's flying a plane, he's going to draft fantasy football teams, and he's going to crash. It's a cascade of bad decisions. The air traffic controller warns him about rough weather and suggests auto-draft for his fantasy leagues, which Joe dismisses as heterosexual, meaning he wants to draft his own players. It's a bizarre non sequitur, but it highlights Joe's stubbornness and his priorities. And then, just like in the movie, lightning strikes, the plane crashes, and he's stranded. The kicker? He drafted Jeff Fiegels, a punter, in the 2nd round. This is where the castaway parallels are hammered home. He's alone on an uncharted island, and he still can't spear a fish with a sharpened stick. This is the joke that keeps giving. He needs to survive, so he opens up FedEx parcels. His wish? Food. His reality? Peanut brittle. And then the punchline, from Peter Griffin. Peter's voiceover confirms he sent it, adding, "Gotcha." It's a classic Peter move, messing with his friends even when they're in dire straits. Quagmire takes over the narration here, explaining that the most important package was his friend on the island. He names it Wilson after Rita Wilson, calling her the most beautiful and talented woman in Hollywood and the true first lady of American culture. It's a hilariously over-the-top compliment, and the joke is that he's clearly sucking up, hoping for some kind of movie deal. He's trying to be Tom Hanks, but he's still Quagmire. After 4 years on the island, Joe admits he's no longer obsessed with time, calling it character development. This is another castaway callback. He's still thinking about Helen Hunt, going nuts, but then snaps out of it, deciding to build a raft. The question? What floats? Not footballs for Tom Brady, which sinks straight to the bottom. And then Peter laughs again, saying 2 for 2. It's unclear what the second thing Peter sent that sunk was, but it adds to the running gag of Peter messing with Joe. Quagmire's narration continues, describing the raft made out of a giant joke box. It's a flimsy raft, and he's got Wilson and another guy, who is described as kind of lame. This new guy is just a talking head, offering generic, pointless observations about the wind and sailing. He's basically deadweight. Quagmire's narration gets increasingly desperate. He's out of water, out of food, and Peter's commentary chimes in again. You're no fun. It's like Peter is the actual narrator of Joe's suffering. Then disaster strikes. Wilson is lost at sea. Quagmire is distraught, yelling, "No, Wilson!" Eventually, he moves on, largely forgetting Wilson. The piano music signals a time jump and a shift in tone. He's picked up by a cargo ship, but then, of course, it's taken over by Somali pirates. It's a chaotic, nonsensical sequence of events. He gets home after years away, ready to see Helen. She's alive, she thought of him every day, he never stopped loving her, and then she drops the bomb. She got back together with Paul Reiser. The reason? They did a Mad About You reboot on Spectrum Originals. This is where the episode really leans into absurdity. Quagmire's narration rails against the fake-sounding reboot. He doesn't know anyone who watched it, and it's presented as this utterly bizarre, niche project that has destroyed his life. He's devastated. Helen was his first true love, and she moved on for a reboot. The final punchline is that 5 years later, portable pornography on telephones was invented, and he's never thought about her since. This entire saga is framed as Quagmire's first love story, which is already weird given he's Quagmire. But then Peter pipes up again, saying he Googled Spectrum Originals and found nothing. Ask Jeeves didn't have it either. It's a meta-joke about the show's own storylines and the potential for them to be completely fabricated or irrelevant. It's a lot.
So the episode takes us on this wild ride through Joe's supposed castaway experience, which is narrated by Quagmire, and ends with Joe's first love story with Helen Hunt, who left him for a Mad About You reboot. It's a layered, convoluted mess, but it's peak Family Guy. And it's all supposed to be a response to Chris's breakup. It's like, oh, Chris is sad? Well, let me tell you about a time I was sad, and then let me tell you about a time Joe was sad, and then let me tell you about a time I was sad again. It's a spiral of sad stories, all filtered through the Family Guy lens of absurdity. The episode, for all its tangents and bizarre narrative choices, is trying to explore the theme of first love and loss. It's showing how these intense early relationships can shape us and how painful it is when they end. But it does it in the most Family Guy way possible, by being utterly ridiculous and referencing pop culture in ways that make you question your sanity. The sheer audacity of turning Castaway into a Quagmire story that then transitions into Joe's first love is something. It's a testament to the show's willingness to throw anything at the wall and see what sticks, even if what sticks is a volleyball named Wilson and a forgotten TV reboot. This episode sits in the season as a clear example of the show's more ambitious, albeit chaotic, storytelling. It's not a straightforward plot. It's a collection of interwoven anecdotes, each trying to outdo the last in terms of absurdity. The writing is what it is. It's inconsistent, with moments of genuine cleverness interspersed with jokes that feel like they were pulled from a dumpster fire. The connections between the stories are tenuous at best, feeling more like a series of sketches than a cohesive narrative. Visually, it's standard Family Guy. Nothing groundbreaking, nothing particularly lazy. The pacing is dictated by the length of the stories, which means some parts feel rushed while others drag. Overall, this episode is a wild card. It's not the best of the season, but it's certainly memorable for its sheer audacity and its commitment to a deeply weird premise.
It's an episode that will probably be debated by fans. Some will love the meta-commentary and the Castaway parody, while others will hate the convoluted storytelling and the lack of a clear emotional core. It's an experiment that didn't entirely land, but you have to give them points for trying something so out there. The episode's verdict is that it's a bit of a mess, but it's an entertaining mess, held together by its sheer commitment to the bit. It's like a multi-car pileup you can't look away from. Okay. Let's dive into some specific moments from this absolute fever dream of an episode. First up, that opening cold open. Joe is getting his eyesight fixed, right? And Peter is there thinking he's Colin Farrell. The dialogue is just chaos. Peter blurts out, "Oh no, but I thought you'd be happy, Colin Farrell." And then Joe, in this really weird gruff voice, goes, "Oi, blimey, get stuffed. I'm gonna see other birds. Good day, mate." I mean, where does that even come from? Is Peter supposed to be British in this moment? Is Joe supposed to be Colin Farrell? The sheer random absurdity of it is hilarious. It's like the writers just threw a bunch of random pop culture references and accents into a blender. The setup is so minimal. Joe's surgery. The payoff is a confused Peter and Joe doing a terrible impression. What it's really saying is that Family Guy operates on pure, unadulterated nonsense. They don't need a logical progression, they just need a funny line, or what they think is a funny line, and they'll contort the entire scene to get there. If I were rewriting it, I'd probably have Peter just ask Joe if he's okay, and then Joe could do the Colin Farrell impression on his own, maybe as a way to cope with the potential blindness. But then it wouldn't be Family Guy, would it? It wouldn't have that jarring, unexpected turn. My personal reaction? I was just baffled, then amused. It's the kind of joke you need to hear twice to appreciate the sheer gall of it. Next, we have Joe's extended Federal Express monologue. He's talking about working for Federal Express, like Tom Hanks in Castaway, and he says the name of the company, Federal Express, no fewer than 6 times in about 30 seconds. It's like an accidental advertisement. He even uses his job to get a refill. "Excuse me, miss. Asking as a Federal Express employee, may I please get a refill of iced tea very quickly, the way Federal Express delivers parcels?" It's so forced.
It's trying way too hard to hammer home the Castaway parallel. What is this moment trying to say? Beyond the obvious spoof, it's showing how Joe, like Peter, is probed into these obsessive, slightly pathetic situations. He's trying to emulate a movie character, but he's doing it through the lens of his mundane job. It's a commentary on how people latch on to narratives and try to impose them on their own lives, even if it means saying a company name 1,000 times. If I were writing this, I'd still have him say Federal Express a lot, but maybe he'd be trying to deliver something for Federal Express on the island, or using the FedEx boxes as a plot device in a more integrated way, rather than just constantly name-dropping. It's less about the job and more about the parcels. My reaction? I was rolling my eyes, but also kind of impressed by the sheer commitment to the bit. It's aggressively unfunny in its repetition, which, in a weird way, makes it funny. Then there's the whole fantasy football draft during the plane crash. Joe is flying, he's on his phone doing fantasy football, and the air traffic controller is trying to warn him about bad weather. The controller says, "Looks like you got rough weather. Maybe you should just do auto draft for your fantasy leagues. Over?" And Joe, completely unfazed, replies, negative control. I am heterosexual. Over?" What? The logic here is non-existent. He's saying he's heterosexual because he wants to draft his own fantasy team, not let the computer do it. It's a complete non sequitur that makes absolutely no sense. It's a joke that only works if you accept that Family Guy characters are insane. It highlights Joe's misplaced priorities. He's more concerned with his fantasy league than his own life. It's a wild commentary on how people can get so absorbed in their hobbies that they lose touch with reality. If I were writing this, I'd have him say something more like, "Negative control. I don't trust algorithms with my team. My draft strategy is pure masculine intuition." It would still be absurd, but it would at least connect to the idea of him being a man in charge of his own destiny, even if that destiny is a plane crash. My personal reaction was just bewilderment. I had to pause the show and ask, did he just say that? The audacity of that line is what makes it linger. Another standout is Quagmire's narration of the island's survival. He names his volleyball friend Wilson after Rita Wilson and calls her the most beautiful and talented woman in Hollywood. He then adds, the true first lady of American culture. I swear, I didn't say all that stuff just so Tom Hanks would let us do this movie. This is pure meta humor. Quagmire, or rather the character Joe becomes in the story, is trying to be Tom Hanks in Castaway, but Quagmire's own voice is narrating, constantly breaking the fourth wall and making jokes about the process. It's a commentary on Hollywood's self-referential nature, and the often transparent attempts to curry favor. It's also a jab at Quagmire's own desperation for attention. If I were writing this, I'd have Quagmire's narration be even more self-serving. Maybe he'd be trying to cast himself as Tom Hanks in a hypothetical Castaway remake, and he's using Joe's story as his audition tape, constantly praising his own performance and lamenting that he didn't get the role. It would lean even harder into the absurdity of Quagmire's ego. My reaction was pure enjoyment of the meta-commentary. It's the kind of joke that makes you appreciate the writer's willingness to play with the show's format and the audience's expectations. Then there's the revelation of Helen Hunt's fate. She left Joe for a Mad About You reboot on Spectrum Originals. Quagmire's narration is furious, which just sounds fake. I mean, did you watch any of that? Do you even know anyone who... I literally do not know one person who saw like a single minute of that. This is gold. It's a dig at the endless streams of reboots and revivals, and the baffling existence of certain niche streaming services. It's relatable because who did watch that Mad About You reboot? It's funny because it's true. It also perfectly captures Quagmire's melodramatic reaction to heartbreak, even if it's Joe's heartbreak he's narrating. What it's saying is that even fictional relationships and the attempts to revive them can have real-world emotional consequences, or at least that's what the show wants us to believe before yanking the rug out from under us. If I were rewriting this, I'd have Helen Hunt explain her decision in even more absurd detail. Maybe she'd say, "Paul and I just reconnected over our shared love for artisanal cheese," or something equally random and disappointing. The Mad About You reboot is funny, but it could be even more specific and bizarre. My reaction was pure, unadulterated laughter. It's a perfectly targeted jab at a very specific corner of pop culture. Let's move on to Joe's story about Jennifer Schnoss. He describes her as the prettiest girl in the camp, and his whole thing is that she was always sniffing around someplace. It's a very heavy-handed nose joke. He then talks about the dirty dancing at night, and his favorite partner is Dancy McGee. The real kicker is when Joe tries to make a move on Jennifer. He says, "Hey, do I know you?" And she replies, "Yeah, we were both in Red Dawn and we probably had sex on set and then you dumped me and now we famously hate each other." This is brilliant. It's a callback to Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey and the immediate assumption that Joe, as a character who's probably inspired by a lot of 80s action movie tropes, would have been in Red Dawn. It's a rapid-fire joke that implies a history Joe clearly doesn't remember. It's also incredibly awkward and funny. What it's saying is that Joe has this idealized memory of his first love, but the reality, if it ever existed, was probably much messier and more complicated.
It's a funny way to subvert the whole first love narrative by introducing this bizarre, forgotten past. My rewrite would be to make the Red Dawn connection even more specific. Maybe Jennifer would mention a particular scene or a line of dialogue. The vagueness of, "we probably had sex on set," is funny, but it could be more targeted. I personally found this joke to be incredibly unexpected and clever. It takes the innocent premise of a camp romance and injects it with this weird, almost traumatic Hollywood history. Then we get to Dancy McGee's TMJ. Joe's friend Dancy has a clicky jaw and thinks she has TMJ. The diagnosis from Joe is hilarious. "Oh no, I hear that causes mild discomfort but doesn't otherwise interfere with lifestyle." This is such a dismissive, understated reaction to a medical issue. It's the kind of thing you say when you don't want to deal with someone's problems. The fact that it's TMJ, a relatively common ailment, makes Joe's flippant attitude even funnier. It's also setting up the stakes for the talent show. Joe is worried about his partner being sidelined. What it's saying is that even in the midst of what seems like a sweet camp romance, there are always mundane, annoying problems that get in the way. It's a reminder that life isn't always grand gestures. Sometimes it's just dealing with a sore jaw. My rewrite would be to make Joe's reaction even more self-centered. Maybe he'd say, "Mild discomfort? That's fine, as long as you can still do the final lift in our dance routine." It would make his focus entirely on the talent show, rather than Dancy's well-being. My reaction was a mix of sympathy for Dancy and amusement at Joe's complete lack of empathy.
It's a great character moment for Joe, showing his self-absorption. Finally, the reveal of Jennifer's father being Dr. Hartman. Dr. Hartman from The Simpsons shows up to fix Dancy's jaw. Peter quips, "Ugh, brutal. What's 3% of frugal, am I right?" This is a strange joke, but it's likely a callback to Peter's own stinginess, or maybe a comment on how poor Joe is. The introduction of Dr. Hartman is a classic Family Guy move, bringing in characters from other shows, or in this case, their own adjacent universe. Hartman's dialogue is classic Hartman. "Shut up, I don't like you because you're poor." It's abrasive, judgmental, and perfectly in character. Dancy's father blames Joe for the injury, stating, "Because it's important for the story, that I blame you for this." This is a meta-commentary on narrative convenience. The father needs to blame Joe for the sake of the story. It's a wink to the audience that the writers are controlling the plot for dramatic effect. Then the father declares, "No dancing with my daughter at the meaningless talent show." This is the crucial turning point that drives Joe's actions. It's the show telling us that sometimes life's biggest obstacles are just plot devices invented to create conflict. My rewrite would be to make Dr. Hartman's treatment even more questionable. Maybe he'd try to fix Dancy's jaw with a banana peel or something equally absurd, and then blame Joe for that too. It would amplify the joke about his incompetence and his prejudice. My reaction was pure joy at seeing Dr. Hartman, and then appreciation for the meta-commentary on storytelling. It's a clever way to acknowledge the artificiality of the plot. Now let's talk about the characters. Joe Swanson in this episode is a mixed bag. On one hand, his Castaway story is a pretty good vehicle for Peter's commentary and Quagmire's narration. Joe himself doesn't do a ton, mostly just reacting and occasionally being the butt of the joke. His best moment is probably his insistence on being heterosexual when the air traffic controller suggests autodraft. It's nonsensical, but it's a funny distillation of his stubbornness. Did this episode change how I see him? Not really. He's still Joe, the cop with a disability, prone to bizarre stories, and often the victim of the show's gags. This episode says his story is going nowhere new. He's just being used as a mouthpiece for other people's jokes. Quagmire, on the other hand, gets a significant chunk of the spotlight through his narration of Joe's story.
His commentary on Helen Hunt and the Mad About You reboot is peak Quagmire, lecherous, judgmental, and oddly passionate about bizarre pop culture. His best moment is probably his rant about the reboot being fake and not knowing anyone who watched it. It's relatable and hilarious. Does this episode change my view of him? It reinforces his character as someone who, despite his perversions, can be surprisingly invested in narratives, even if they aren't his own. It suggests the show is willing to explore his voice in different capacities. Peter Griffin is mostly relegated to being the observer and commentator in this episode. His reactions to Joe's story, especially his repeated gotcha and laughter, are classic Peter. He's the mischievous force behind some of the absurdity, as shown by him sending peanut brittle. His best moment is his commentary on the Federal Express parcel sinking, saying, "2 for 2." It's a small moment, but it's pure Peter, finding amusement in others' misfortune.
This episode doesn't reveal much new about Peter. He's operating as he always does, the catalyst for chaos and the one who points out the absurdity of everyone else's situation. His story seems to be going nowhere. He's just the anchor for the show's humor. Griffin is barely a factor, beyond being the initial impetus for the family emergency. His breakup is the catalyst, but he doesn't really feature in the stories. His best moment is, well, he doesn't really have one. He's just the setup. This episode doesn't do anything for Chris's character arc. He's just a plot device to get the ball rolling. His story is going nowhere. The other characters, like the air traffic controller and the Somali pirates, are fleeting. They serve their purpose and disappear. Dr. Hartman from The Simpsons shows up for a brief but memorable cameo, delivering his signature brand of insult. His appearance is a fun Easter egg, but doesn't really contribute to the plot beyond resolving Dancy's jaw issue. It's a nod to fans, a moment of crossover fun, but not a character development moment for anyone in the Family Guy universe. It just highlights the show's willingness to pull characters from other franchises to inject some humor. Let's dig into some of the finer details people might have missed. First off, the sheer number of Castaway references. It's not just the island in Wilson. It's the Federal Express name-dropping, the desperate survival, the longing for a lost love, and even the vague timeline of years spent on the island.
This level of sustained parody is a gamble. Most viewers would get the gist from the volleyball, but the writers kept doubling down, almost daring people to get bored. It's important because it shows the writers' commitment to the bit and how much they were willing to stretch Joe's character to fit this specific narrative mold. It's not just a throwaway gag, it's the entire structure of the first half of the episode. Secondly, the Helen Hunt, Paul Reiser, Mad About You reboot angle. The fact that Spectrum Originals is mentioned and Peter then says he can't find it on Google or Ask Jeeves is a brilliant piece of meta-commentary. It's a joke about the ephemeral nature of streaming content and the obscurity of certain revivals. It means the writers were aware that this particular reboot might not have been a major cultural event, and they're using that obscurity to fuel the humor. It's a subtle dig at the media landscape. Most people probably just heard Mad About You reboot and laughed, missing the deeper commentary on the lack of visibility for such shows. Third, Joe's fiancée Helen Hunt's line, "Give me a kiss, you time-obsessed beardless man who is unable to spear a fish with a sharpened stick." This is a crucial callback. We later see Joe's inability to spear fish on the island and his overall struggle with basic survival skills. The fact that she pointed this out before he was stranded showed that his weaknesses were already apparent. It's a subtle detail that enriches the narrative. It's easy to miss because it's buried in a seemingly mundane romantic exchange, but it sets up a recurring gag. Fourth, the mention of Jeff Fiegels as the punter drafted in the second round. Jeff Fiegels was an actual NFL punter who played for many years. The joke here is the absurdity of drafting a punter that high in fantasy football. It's a niche reference that fantasy football fans would appreciate, but even those who don't play will get the humor and drafting a player considered less valuable. It adds a layer of realism to the fantasy football parody, making it funnier for those who understand the context. It's a sign that the writers are willing to put in the effort for specific fan bases. Fifth, the character of Dancy McGee. Her name itself is a joke, hinting at her dancing ability, but the detail about her jaw clicking and being diagnosed with TMJ is itself a subtle nod to common, sometimes annoying physical ailments. It's not a big, flashy joke, but it's a realistic detail that grounds the otherwise outlandish story. It makes the talent show stakes feel a little more genuine, even within the absurdity. It's a background detail that adds a bit of texture to the plot. Finally, the appearance of Dr. Hartman. For fans of The Simpsons, this is a huge Easter egg. Hartman's personality, his arrogance, his disdain for the poor, his general unpleasantness is perfectly captured. The fact that he's Dancy's father and has to fix her jaw is a funny twist. It's a deliberate crossover that Family Guy often does, blurring the lines between their own universe and others, especially The Simpsons. It's a moment of pure fan service, and if you didn't know who Dr. Hartman was, you'd just see a grumpy doctor being rude. Let's talk about what they could have done differently, because honestly, this episode had some wild ideas that didn't quite stick the landing perfectly. First, the Federal Express overload. Joe saying Federal Express 6 times in 30 seconds is overkill. It's like they were afraid the audience wouldn't get the Castaway reference if they didn't keep hammering it home. My alternative, I'd have Joe say it maybe twice, but then he finds a specific Federal Express package on the island that becomes crucial to his survival. Maybe it's a survival kit or a tool or even just a really sturdy box he can use. That way, the brand is integrated into the plot, not just shouted. It would feel less like a forced advertisement and more like a clever narrative tie-in. Second, the Mad About You reboot ending for Joe's story. While hilarious and meta, the fact that Helen Hunt just moved on for a reboot feels a bit
weak. I would have made the reason more specific and absurd. Maybe Helen Hunt decided she was tired of Joe's constant preoccupation with fantasy football, or that she discovered he was secretly a closeted Tom Hanks fanboy. Or even better, she left him for Paul Reiser because he promised her a starring role in an interpretive dance piece about fiscal policy. That would have been more outlandish and fitting with the show's tone. The reboot is good, but it could have been pushed to a more extreme, character-driven absurdity. It's a missed opportunity for peak Family Guy weirdness. Third, Joe's first love story with Jennifer Schnoz. The Poconos joke felt a bit thrown in. While Jennifer's backstory from Red Dawn was a great surprise, the camp romance itself felt a little underdeveloped before that twist. I would have leaned more into the innocence of the camp romance for Joe. Perhaps he was a genuinely sweet, shy kid, and Jennifer was the first girl to ever notice him. Then, the reveal that she's suddenly yelling at him about Red Dawn would be even more shocking and funny. It would create a stronger contrast between Joe's idealized memory and the bizarre reality. This would make his entire tale of first love feel more substantial before the punchline. Finally, the ending. The episode ends with Joe talking about Jennifer being like the wind, and Quagmire just wanting him to say he misses her. It's a bit anticlimactic after all the Castaway and Mad About You madness. I would have preferred a more direct tie-in to Chris's breakup. Maybe Joe's story is so long and convoluted that Chris has completely forgotten he was sad in the first place. Or the moral of the story is something like, even if your first love leaves you for a reboot, you can always find someone else who maybe didn't see that reboot. It would bring it back to the initial premise in a more satisfying, albeit still ridiculous way. It would tie the episode together in a neat little bow, a bow made of pure, unadulterated silliness. All right. This episode, I'm giving it a 6.7 out of 10. It's not a complete disaster, but it's far from a masterpiece. The score is what it is because the episode has moments of genuine brilliance, particularly in its meta-commentary and its commitment to parodies. However, the execution is often clunky, and the narrative threads feel more loosely connected than intentionally woven. The sheer audacity of the Castaway parody and the Mad About You reboot joke definitely push it up the scale. If it had managed to integrate those elements more smoothly into a cohesive story, or if Joe's own story had a clear emotional arc that didn't feel like a setup for other people's jokes.
Okay, so this episode is titled Friend of Gary. And, watching Family Guy these days, it feels like they're just throwing darts at a wall of pop culture and hoping something sticks. And that's kind of their whole thing, right? Like, they've got Mike Henry, who is apparently the mastermind behind this particular gem. And honestly, Mike, buddy, I love you. I do. You're a legend. But sometimes I feel like your brain is just a really chaotic filing cabinet. Like you opened it up, a bunch of crumpled papers fell out, and you just taped them together in whatever order they landed. And that's what this episode felt like. It's like, hey, what if we did a Father's Day episode, but like a Family Guy Father's Day episode? So, awful. And then what if Peter had to do a scavenger hunt, but like an aggressively uncomfortable scavenger hunt? And then, what if there's a whole subplot about Mayor West trying to shoot his own dad because reasons, and Peter somehow gets involved in that too? It's just a lot. It's a lot of very, very separate ideas smashed together with duct tape and pure unadulterated chaos. Like the whole episode opens with that song, right? The classic "It Seems Today That All You See" bit, and you think, okay, maybe we're going for some genuine Father's Day sentiment. Nope. Immediately we're into Peter's disgusting saliva string record attempt, because of course. And then Lois is like, "Happy Father's Day, here's a scavenger hunt." And Peter's reaction is just so pure, unadulterated dread. He knows, we know, this is going to be awful. He wants to do the typical dad things, put his hand down his pants, watch golf, and that's what makes the whole scavenger hunt premise so absurdly funny. It's this forced, elaborate thing that Peter just clearly doesn't want any part of. And the locations they go to, Meg's first bra purchase at Goodwill? Come on! And Brian is just there, happily taking notes, probably for a future self-help book that will never sell. The whole thing is a masterclass in how not to celebrate Father's Day. And you think, all right, this is bad enough. But then, oh no, then we get into the Mayor West subplot. And it's a lot. A whole father-son duel over abandonment. It's dark, it's weird, and it's Family Guy weird, which means it's like dark and weird, but also somehow mundane and utterly baffling. It's like they said, hey, how can we make this Father's Day episode more uncomfortable? And then someone just screamed, let's make it about a man waiting to shoot his dad. And everyone else nodded.
The absolute insanity of Peter getting involved in this whole cowboy standoff is just peak Family Guy. He's just there trying to get a paper shredder recommendation from the mayor, while the mayor is literally waiting to duel his outlaw father. It's the kind of surreal, jarring humor that the show is known for, and when it lands, it's gold. But when it doesn't, well, you get this. It's a testament to the show's enduring, albeit often misguided, ambition. You know, if you're finding this deep dive into Family Guy chaos entertaining, do me a favor and smash that subscribe button. It really helps the channel out. And frankly, I need the encouragement to keep watching this stuff so you don't have to. And stick around, because we're going to break down exactly why this episode is such a mess. And maybe, just maybe, find a glimmer of something good buried under all the saliva and old cowboy hats. Because believe me, we are going deep. We're going to unpack every single bizarre choice made in this episode, from the deepest, darkest cowboy drama to Peter's questionable parenting advice. Prepare yourselves, it's going to be a wild ride. This episode, Friend of Gary, is a prime example of Family Guy in its later seasons, a chaotic whirlwind of loosely connected storylines and jokes that range from inspired to utterly baffling. On the surface, it's a Father's Day episode. Peter is subjected to a scavenger hunt organized by Lois, which is about as enjoyable for him as a root canal. This involves visiting places tied to his kids' awkward childhood moments, like where he bought Meg's first bra. Meanwhile, a completely separate narrative unfolds involving Mayor West and his estranged outlaw father, Old West. This is a whole dramatic Western-style conflict where the mayor waits every year to duel his dad, stemming from abandonment issues. It's incredibly dark and out of left field for a Father's Day plot, but that's Family Guy for you. The two plots eventually collide, as Peter, in his typical oblivious fashion, gets tangled up in Mayor West's personal vendetta, trying to get a paper shredder recommendation while the mayor is preparing for a gunfight. The episode is trying to say something, I guess, about fathers and sons and the complicated dynamics there. It's also a commentary, a very skewed one, on Father's Day itself, highlighting how it can be this forced holiday where you have to pretend everything is fine. But the execution is where it falters. The writing feels disjointed, like two different episode ideas were crammed together. The pacing is all over the place, with some scenes dragging and others feeling rushed. The jokes are inconsistent. Some land with a surprising punch, while others fall flatter than a deflated whoopee cushion. Visually, it's the standard Family Guy animation. Nothing groundbreaking, but there are moments where the visual gags are a bit more creative than usual, especially in the Western sequences. Overall, this episode is a messy, uneven ride. It has moments of classic Family Guy absurdity, but they're buried under a heap of nonsensical plot developments and tonal whiplash. I'd give it a solid meh for effort, but a needs improvement for execution. It's not the worst episode of the season, but it's certainly not one that's going to stick with you. It's more of a forgotten relic in the Family Guy vault. It tries to juggle too many things and ends up dropping most of them. It's the show attempting to be profound with its dysfunctional family dynamics and then immediately derailing into pure silliness, leaving the audience with a confused shrug. The attempt to weave the Mayor West plot into the Father's Day scavenger hunt feels less like clever storytelling and more like a desperate attempt to justify both storylines existing in the same episode. It's a testament to Family Guy's longevity that they can still put out episodes like this and get away with it, but it really shows the strain of maintaining a consistent quality over so many seasons. This episode is a prime example of what happens when the writers have too many ideas and not enough focus, leading to a narrative that feels less like a story and more like a random collection of scenes. It's the kind of episode that makes you question why you keep watching, and yet here we are, dissecting it. It's a love-hate relationship with this show, and this episode definitely leans towards the hate side of things, at least in terms of narrative coherence. It's a prime example of Family Guy's tendency to swing for the fences with its wacky premises, but often striking out spectacularly. The underlying themes of paternal relationships and the pressure of holidays are there, but they're so buried under layers of absurdity and gross-out humor that they're almost impossible to find. It's a shame, because there's potential in the Mayor West storyline, but it's ultimately overshadowed by the more typical Family Guy antics. This episode feels like a Frankenstein's monster of discarded plot ideas, stitched together haphazardly.
It's a reminder that not every Family Guy episode can be a winner, and sometimes it's the ones that try to be a little too much that end up being the least satisfying. The episode's reliance on callbacks and recurring gags, while sometimes effective, here feels more like padding to stretch out the runtime rather than meaningful contributions to the story. It's a narrative that's more interested in ticking off a checklist of Family Guy tropes than in crafting a compelling or even coherent story. Let's dive into the madness, moment by moment. First up, that opening. The classic Family Guy theme song, right? It's supposed to be this warm, fuzzy intro, but they immediately undercut it with Peter trying to break his saliva string record. 9 inches! And Lois is just there, numb to it all, because she's heard it all before. It's peak Peter. Gross, oblivious, and somehow still the center of attention on Father's Day. The gag itself is disgusting, but the real humor comes from the family's deadpan reactions. Brian, ever the sophisticated observer, just takes the cup to his nibbling corner, which is just a euphemism for him being Brian. It's a strong start in terms of establishing the tone. Father's Day is here, and Peter is still Peter. What would I change? Maybe make the saliva string actually longer and have it connect to something absurd happening in the background, like a bird getting tangled in it, just to elevate the sheer lunacy. Then we get the big Father's Day present, the scavenger hunt. Peter's reaction is priceless. That inner Al Pacino scream, "No! No! No!" It's perfect because you can see the horror dawning on his face. He knows this means work. He knows this means activity. He wants to be a lump on the couch. Lois, bless her heart, thinks this elaborate, cringe-inducing scavenger hunt is a good idea. Her justification is that dads want fun, and Peter's definition of fun is clearly different from hers. The irony of organizing a scavenger hunt that leads to deeply embarrassing childhood memories is just chef's kiss, Family Guy. My favorite part here is Peter's line about dads wanting to put their hand down their pants and watch a guy from a weird country win golf. That's so relatable to the caricature of a suburban dad. I would have made the scavenger hunt even more humiliating, like each clue leads to a place where Peter embarrassed himself or his family publicly. The Goodwill bra stop is just the tip of the iceberg. Speaking of the scavenger hunt, the tour guide in the RV is a great visual gag.
He's living the Nomadland life, which is a darkly funny commentary on current societal trends. The fact that he puts on a microphone headset even though they're feet apart is classic sitcom absurdity, and the feedback whine is just the cherry on top. The first clue leads them to where Meg's first bra was bought. Goodwill. This is where the episode starts to get really uncomfortable. Lois's explanation that they sell used underwear is gross, but the dialogue Peter has with the store clerk is even worse. The clerk's deadpan delivery of "in a garbage bag behind the lamps" is surprisingly hilarious. It's the mundane absurdity of it all. I mean, who expects to buy a used bra for their daughter from a garbage bag? This whole segment is designed to make you squirm, and it succeeds. I would have made the clerk more enthusiastic, like he was selling a prize. Like, "Oh, you want the used bra? Excellent choice. That one's been worn by a real teenager." The clue about the bird and the coop is a pretty obvious setup for the giant chicken. And here's where the episode tries to inject some unexpected lore. The fact that the giant chicken is super rich because his family got into the telecom game and laid fiber optic cables. And Quahog has 5 of the top 15 richest chickens in the world. It's so random, so absurd, that it becomes funny. And Joe's podcast, Joe's Gold, The Hidden Gems of Quahog. The pun, "Ask and ye shall Joe Sieve," is so bad it's good. It's a perfect example of Family Guy humor, building a ridiculous premise on a terrible pun. The interaction with Joe about the HelloFresh promo code is also gold. The idea that Joe's fake promo code is causing actual real-world problems is peak meta-commentary. I'd have made the promo code actually work, but for something completely unrelated and terrible, like a subscription to a cult newsletter. The scavenger hunt concludes with a clue leading to the ranch, and the big gift is that Peter is now the sponsor of a rescue sheep. This is the ultimate letdown for Peter, who clearly wanted something more conventionally masculine. His question, "Where are we going to dinner?" and Lois's response, "Baja fresh," is a pun so terrible, so Family Guy, it's almost genius. The image of Peter stuck with a sheep on Father's Day is just a perfect visual punchline to this entire ill-conceived scavenger hunt. I think the writers missed an opportunity here. Instead of just sponsoring a sheep, Peter should have been given the sheep as a pet. Imagine Peter trying to train a sheep in the Griffin house. That would have been a whole other level of chaotic fun. Now, let's shift gears to the Mayor West plot, which is where things get truly bizarre.
The ranch hand explains that Mayor West is waiting to shoot his father, Old West, who abandoned the family to become an outlaw. This is explained with this whole dramatic backstory about a deathbed promise from his mother. It's supposed to be serious, but the absurdity of a Wild West duel happening in Quahog is inherently funny. The ranch hand's dry delivery of, "He's doing what he does every Father's Day, waiting to shoot his dad," is perfect. And then Peter, still wrapped up in the scavenger hunt nonsense, just casually asks about paper shredders. It's the ultimate tonal clash. I would have leaned into the Western parody even harder. Maybe have the ranch hand speak in full cowboy slang, like, "Well, shucks, mister, the mayor's just fixin' to settle an old score with his pappy. Happens every year, like clockwork." The scene where Peter tries to get a paper shredder recommendation from Mayor West is a masterclass in awkwardness. Mayor West is clearly in a very tense, dramatic moment preparing for a gunfight, and Peter is just focused on office supplies. The lubricator sheet's advice is a strangely specific and unhelpful detail. Mayor West says, "A real man is always ready for an ambush," and then he shoots Peter in the limb. This is where the show really pushes the boundaries of what's acceptable. It's violent, it's shocking, and it's played for dark laughs. The dialogue about cowboy affection and the Chris Brown defense is such a loaded meta joke. It's the kind of thing that makes you go, did they really just go there? I would have made the shooting less violent. Maybe a flesh wound that causes Peter to yelp dramatically, and then the mayor apologizes profusely. That way, it's still funny without being genuinely disturbing. The arrival of Old West, played by a surprisingly decent-looking animation of his dad, is the pivot point. He's the charming outlaw who's apparently just popping by for Father's Day. His dialogue with Mayor West is filled with this weird mix of genuine paternal disappointment and casual threats. He even brings a juice box, which is a hilariously mundane gift for someone you're about to duel. The whole exchange about the Civic and the sea is peak car dad humor, or at least an attempt at it. It's the kind of joke that would land better if the context wasn't a deadly duel.
I would have had Old West try to guilt trip Mayor West, like, "Son, all I ever wanted was for you to join me on the trail, and you chose this desk job, this paper-pushing life." Then the bike gets stolen, sold to a guy on Craigslist. It's a modern twist on a classic Western trope, and it's a really funny way to leave Peter and Mayor West stranded and vulnerable. The ranch hand's nonchalant, "Sorry, it's gone, sold it to a guy on Craigslist," is perfect. He's just a guy doing his job, even if his job involves facilitating high-noon duels and fencing stolen property. The image of them being viciously assaulted by the theft of their bike is a great visual gag. I would have made the thief someone completely unexpected, like a tiny child on a tricycle who somehow outsmarts them. Alan, the new character introduced here, is the comic relief who ends up being the actual responsible one. He offers a ride, but only after leaving the mangled man behind. The implication is that Mayor West is too injured to be transported efficiently, and Alan just doesn't care. This whole part of the episode is about abandonment and obligation, but filtered through a Family Guy lens of pure, unadulterated chaos. The line about the 5 bullets for prey and 1 for yourself is a grim, darkly funny warning from Alan. It really sets up the stakes for the West family drama. I would have made Alan's car a beaten-up, vintage model that's barely functional, adding another layer of comedic desperation. Mayor West and Old West end up at the Griffin house, Peter having invited his cowboy friend over. Lois's reaction, "No, you can't keep coming home with things. This is the iguana all over again," is perfect. It highlights Peter's chronic inability to learn his lesson and Lois's exhaustion with it. The comparison to the iguana is a great callback to a past episode, reminding us of Peter's consistent irresponsibility. The scene where Mayor West's cowboy persona is supposed to be endearing to Lois, with his ma'am routine, is meant to be charming, but it just feels forced and awkward. It's the kind of plot point that makes you wonder if the writers actually know how people interact. I would have had Lois be immediately suspicious of Mayor West, seeing through his act, like she'd call him out on his ridiculous cowboy persona. Stewie's conversation with Old West reveals the depth of his outlaw lineage, going back generations. The quick wrap-up of his backstory, "My daddy was an outlaw just like his daddy and his daddy before him. They raised me to be the same. After Wild was born, I tried getting honest work," is presented so matter-of-factly.
His audition for America's Got Talent and rejection for not being appreciated for his lasso skills is a hilarious, pathetic attempt at redemption. The scar on his face, earned during a heist to save a posse member, is presented as a badge of honor, reinforcing the outlaw code. I would have made his attempt at honest work something even more ridiculous, like opening an artisanal cheese shop that fails spectacularly. Old West's offer to stay and help Mayor West win back his son is a surprisingly wholesome turn, even if it's coming from an outlaw. The idea of domesticating him is funny, and his immediate impulse to shoot my pistol in the air to celebrate is a perfect character moment. The worry about it turning into a mess on Nextdoor is peak modern suburban anxiety. It's this blend of old-school outlaw mentality and new-school social media concerns that makes Family Guy funny. I think this is a moment where the episode could have actually gone somewhere interesting, exploring the possibility of reconciliation. But it's Family Guy, so it's bound to get weird. I'd have had him celebrate by shooting his pistol, but accidentally hitting the power line and plunging the neighborhood into darkness, leading to a whole new set of problems. And then we get to Peter's perfect dad uniform. The Marriott polo shirt indicating he's handsy when drunk, the jean shorts for impotence, and the sunglasses for storming the Capitol. It's incredibly specific and tells a whole story about the modern dad stereotype. Peter, in his earnest but misguided way, is trying to be a good dad, or at least appear like one. His advice to Stewie about the girl he likes is classic old-timey, slightly disturbing dating advice. The silver dollar in the corset, the floral wallpaper, the boot knife. It's a wild and frankly slightly violent approach to romance. It's the kind of advice that would get you arrested today. I would have made Peter's advice even more outlandish, perhaps involving a duel or a complex series of coded messages. The dried hand of a Paiute as a gift from Mayor West to Peter is peak bizarre. It's presented as something very important to Mayor West, a symbol of his Paiute heritage. Peter's reaction, is this a way to break some kind of curse on you, is spot on. He's clearly uncomfortable and just wants to pass it off. The idea that it'll just wind back in his pocket is a funny, self-aware gag about how these gifts and traditions can feel forced.
I would have made the hand actually do something magical, like grant Peter temporary superpowers or a mild curse. The climax with Mayor West and Old West finally confronting each other. Mayor West is ready for the duel, but then Old West reveals he's not there to fight, but to make amends, and then shoots Mayor West in the limb. The Chris Brown defense callback is there again, and it's still awkward. Old West then says, "A real man is always ready for an ambush." This entire interaction is a twisted take on father-son reconciliation. Old West trying to teach his son the outlaw way, even while trying to make amends. It's a deeply messed up dynamic. I would have had Old West actually try to talk it out, but then get interrupted by the arrival of the police, who arrest him for his past crimes. The aftermath is everyone getting arrested for shooting the mayor. Peter, who was just trying to get a paper shredder, ends up caught in the crossfire. The ranch hand's quick sale of their bike to a Craigslist guy is such a good detail. It's the quick, transactional nature of life in Quahog. The fact that Peter forgot his phone and had to go back for it, only to get caught up in the arrest, is such a Peter move. It's the culmination of his complete lack of awareness. I would have had the arrest be more dramatic, with SWAT teams descending, only for them to realize it was just a minor scuffle. The final scene where Mayor West tells Peter, "I should have never listened to you," is classic Peter. He tries to help, and it just makes everything worse. The Paiute hand being passed to Peter as a safe place is another layer of the curse or obligation. It's a clear symbol of the mess Peter has gotten himself into. The episode ends with a cliffhanger of sorts, with Mayor West being led away in handcuffs and Peter left holding the cursed hand. It's a fittingly chaotic ending for a chaotic episode. I think the ending missed a trick. Instead of just getting arrested, Mayor West could have been forced to take his dad's place as an outlaw. That would have been a truly dark Family Guy twist. Looking at the characters in this episode, Peter is, as usual, the catalyst for chaos. He's oblivious, selfish, and somehow always ends up in the middle of things. His Father's Day uniform is a hilarious, biting commentary on modern fatherhood stereotypes. He's not necessarily a good person, but he's consistently Peter, and that's what makes him work, even when he's driving everyone else crazy.
Lois, on the other hand, is the long-suffering wife, forced to deal with Peter's antics and organize events that she knows will be disasters. Her exasperation is palpable, and it's a familiar role, but she plays it well. She's the anchor to reality in the Griffin household, constantly trying to maintain some semblance of order.
Brian, the intellectual canine, is present but not particularly impactful in this episode. He's the observer, taking notes for his own self-important projects, and occasionally enjoying the chaos from a safe distance. His contribution is minimal, which is fine. He's not always the focus. Stewie, the diabolical baby genius, gets a moment to shine with his dialogue with Old West, exploring his family's lineage and the nature of being an outlaw. It's a brief but interesting exploration of his character, hinting at deeper motivations beyond just world domination. Chris is largely absent, which is typical for him when he's not directly involved in Peter's schemes. He's the background noise of the Griffin family. Meg, of course, is the punchline of the scavenger hunt, her awkward past being trotted out for laughs. Her presence is less about character development and more about serving the plot's cringe factor. Mayor West is the main focus of the subplot, and his story is surprisingly dark and complex for Family Guy. His unresolved trauma and desire for reconciliation with his father are played for laughs, but there's an underlying pathos there. His descent into violence and subsequent arrest highlight the show's willingness to go to dark places. Old West, the outlaw father, is a classic archetype. He's charming, dangerous, and ultimately a product of his environment. His character adds a layer of Western parody to the episode, and his interactions with Mayor West provide some of the episode's most memorable moments. The supporting characters, like the ranch hand and Alan, serve their purpose in moving the plot along, providing exposition or comic relief as needed. They're fleeting, but effective in their roles. What this episode says about the characters is that the core dysfunction of the Griffin family is still alive and well, and that the show is still willing to explore darker themes, even if they don't always land perfectly. It shows that Peter's relationships, particularly with his own family and now with Mayor West, are consistently strained and often lead to disaster. Lois's enduring patience is tested, and the kids are largely casualties of Peter's misguided attempts at Father's Day celebration.
For Mayor West, it's a glimpse into a darker past and a strained paternal relationship that the show hints at being a recurring theme. Now, let's dig for those hidden gems. First, the nibbling corner Brian retreats to. It's such a casual yet telling phrase. It implies Brian has a designated spot for his discreet enjoyment, whatever that might entail. It's a little wink to the audience about Brian's often unspoken vices and refined yet slightly depraved tastes. It's easy to miss because it's just a throwaway line, but it adds a layer to Brian's character that's more than just being the voice of reason. Second, the specific mention of Baja Fresh as a restaurant name is a subtle but effective Family Guy pun. It's so on the nose and plays into the sheep theme perfectly. It's the kind of joke that's so bad you have to appreciate the commitment to the bit. Casual viewers might just hear it as a random restaurant name, but fans recognize the wordplay and the dedication to delivering a groan-worthy pun. It shows the writers are still thinking about those small, silly details. Third, the reference to the iguana incident when Lois rejects Mayor West staying over. This is a brilliant callback. It shows continuity in the show's history and reminds the audience of Peter's past mistakes and Lois's long-suffering nature. It's not a plot point that's essential to this episode's story, but it adds a layer of depth for longtime viewers who remember previous absurdities. It grounds the current situation in the show's established canon of Peter being a walking disaster. Fourth, the Chris Brown defense when Mayor West shoots Peter. This is a bold, topical reference that might fly over the heads of younger viewers or those not familiar with celebrity legal issues. It's a dark joke referencing the infamous assault case, and it implies that Mayor West's actions, while violent, are being framed in a way that's almost acceptable within the show's warped logic, similar to how Chris Brown's past actions have been navigated in public discourse. It's a sharp, if uncomfortable, piece of commentary. Fifth, the dried hand of a Paiute. This is presented as a significant artifact by Mayor West. While it's a prop for the plot, it's also a subtle nod to Western folklore and Native American spiritual beliefs, albeit in a very Family Guy, commodified way. The fact that it's supposedly cursed and can't be simply discarded adds a layer of dark fantasy to the otherwise grounded, in a Family Guy sense, plot.
It's not a direct cultural appropriation joke, but more of a Western trope woven into the narrative. Sixth, the whole nomad landing it in this thing comment from the RV driver. This is a direct reference to the Oscar-winning film about a woman who lives as a modern-day nomad in her van. It's a cultural touchstone that the show is leveraging to add a layer of contemporary relevance and a touch of commentary on societal trends. It's a quick joke that might be missed if you're not familiar with the film, but it adds a nice bit of topical humor to the scene. Okay, Let's play the devil's advocate and imagine some alternate realities for this episode. First, that whole scavenger hunt. What if, instead of just visiting sad childhood locations, the clues led Peter to places where he genuinely did something good? Like, maybe he anonymously helped someone out or had a moment of unexpected kindness. It would still be a Family Guy scavenger hunt, but instead of pure cringe, it would have a small, surprising heart. That would be a different kind of uncomfortable. Peter being forced to confront his own rare moments of decency. It would be a profound twist. Second, the Mayor West and Old West duel. Instead of a violent confrontation, what if it was a bizarre public talent competition? Like, they had to prove who was the better outlaw through ridiculous challenges. The fastest gun draw against a pack of prairie dogs, the most convincing cowboy poetry, the best whiskey drinking speed. It would still be absurd, but less grim, and allow for more comedic set pieces and guest appearances from other characters competing. Imagine the Griffins judging the cowboy talent show. Third, the ending. What if instead of getting arrested, Mayor West and Old West ended up joining forces and becoming a rogue father-son outlaw duo? They could then try to recruit Peter to be their getaway driver or something equally disastrous. This would allow their storyline to continue and integrate Peter into their weird world in a more permanent, chaotic way. It would make Peter's involvement feel less like a random accident and more like an inevitable consequence of his chaotic nature. It would push the boundary of how far the show would go with its character relationships. So, the verdict on Friend of Gary. I'm giving this episode a 5.7 out of 10. It's not a complete disaster, but it's far from a triumph. The score is low because the episode suffers from a severe lack of cohesion. The Father's Day scavenger hunt and the Mayor West Western drama feel like two completely separate episodes that were stitched together with minimal effort.
The jokes are hit or miss, with some genuinely funny moments buried under a pile of forgettable gags and uncomfortable situations. The Mayor West subplot has potential for dark humor and commentary on father-son relationships, but it's ultimately undermined by its random placement and the forced integration with Peter's storyline. The episode feels like it's trying too hard to be both a typical Family Guy gross-out comedy and a surprisingly dark, dramatic Western parody, and it fails to excel at either. This episode is for the hardcore Family Guy fan who appreciates any and all content, no matter how disjointed. Casual viewers might find themselves completely lost and frustrated. What would have pushed the score higher? A much tighter integration of the two main plot lines, or at least a clearer thematic connection beyond the superficial Father's Day premise. If the scavenger hunt locations had somehow tied directly into the Mayor West storyline, or if Peter's obliviousness had a more direct impact on the Western drama, it might have felt more purposeful. Instead, we got two separate stories that just happened to occur around the same time. It's a shame because there were kernels of good ideas in here, particularly in the Mayor West plot, but they were lost in the shuffle. And that brings us back to Mike Henry and his wonderfully chaotic brain. He's a comedic genius, no doubt, but sometimes I think he just throws so much spaghetti at the wall that it's inevitable some of it is going to slide right off. And this episode, unfortunately, saw a lot of spaghetti slide. It's the kind of episode that makes you question your fandom, but also, you'll probably still watch the next one, because that's the Family Guy curse. Or maybe it's a blessing.
All right, settle in, you degenerates. We're diving deep into another episode of Family Guy, Season 21, Episode 13. And you know what that means, right? It means we're probably about to witness Peter Griffin do something monumentally stupid that somehow, miraculously, ends up having consequences for everyone else but him. I swear, Seth MacFarlane's writing room must just be a bunch of guys throwing darts at a board of terrible life choices and seeing what sticks. This week, we're talking about parenthood, or at least Peter's special brand of it. It's like they said, hey, what if Peter had to actually take care of the kids for a bit? And then someone else probably said, yeah, but only if it's incredibly inconvenient and he can still be a complete moron about it. And boom, we've got ourselves an episode. We're going to break down all the dumb jokes, the questionable parenting advice, and the moments where you're just left wondering, how is this still on the air? But hey, that's why you're here, right? To dissect the madness. And believe me, there's madness. Stick around because we're about to find out if Peter can even handle a simple Nintendo game, let alone his own children. And you won't believe the things that happen when he's left in charge. So hey, if you're enjoying this deep dive into the Family Guy abyss, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. So you don't miss out on future explorations of animated absurdity. It's like
If you don't subscribe, you're basically admitting you don't care about the state of modern sitcoms. And that's just sad, like Peter trying to play Donkey Kong. Now, on the surface, this episode is all about Peter stepping up to the plate, or at least stumbling towards it, when Lois gets injured. She's laid up for a week, and suddenly Peter is the primary caregiver for the kids. Meanwhile, Chris is trying to relive his glory days with an old Nintendo, which, of course, Peter immediately ruins because, well, he's Peter. It's a classic Family Guy setup, a simple premise blown completely out of proportion by Peter's complete lack of self-awareness and basic human decency. The episode tries to explore the idea of what it means to be a dad, especially compared to a mom, and it does so through Peter's usual obnoxious lens. We see him struggle, we see him lie, and we see him somehow charm his way and to get free stuff because people inexplicably pity him. It's a pretty standard episode for this later season, honestly.
It's got the typical disjointed storylines, the jokes that land and the ones that just sort of fall flat with a sad thud. The writing feels a little scattered, like they had a few good ideas and just crammed them together without much thought to how they'd flow. Visually, it's Family Guy. It looks like Family Guy. Nothing groundbreaking, nothing particularly terrible. It's just there. But the real question is, does it work? My initial verdict, it's a solid meh. It's not the worst thing they've ever done, but it's far from the best. It's an episode that exists, serves its purpose of filling 22 minutes, and then promptly exits your brain, probably for the best. But we're going to dig into why it's just fine. Let's start with the absolute chaos of Peter trying to play Donkey Kong with Chris. This is where the episode really kicks off, and it's a perfect example of Peter's inability to grasp anything remotely complex or enjoyable without making it about himself. We see him absolutely losing his mind because Chris doesn't appreciate the supposed majesty of this ancient video game. Peter's rant about how this game is the greatest ever and Chris just spitting out that it sucks is peak Family Guy. It's so over the top, so aggressive, for something so trivial. Peter's whole argument is based on nostalgia, and when that doesn't work, he just devolves into a spoiled child. The idea that Chris could build a better game on their house is just ridiculous, but it highlights how out of touch Peter is. He can't even appreciate a classic without imposing his own bizarre, nonsensical standards on it. It's like watching a toddler throw a fit because his crayon broke. The subsequent scene where they literally build a Donkey Kong house with Stewie dressed as a damsel in distress is just pure absurdity. It's a visual gag that's meant to be funny, and it is in that specific Family Guy way where you laugh because it's so bizarre. But it also underlines Peter's complete lack of understanding. He thinks recreating the game is the solution, not understanding why Chris didn't like it in the first place. It's a moment that's loud and visually interesting, but it's also incredibly shallow. I would have loved to see them actually delve into the mechanics of why Donkey Kong is actually fun, or why Chris's modern sensibilities just don't jive with it. Instead, it's just Peter being Peter, and the joke is that he's being Peter. It's a missed opportunity for a genuinely funny exploration of generational differences in gaming.
Then we get to the main event, Peter as the solo caregiver. Lois breaks her foot, and suddenly, Peter is in charge. His immediate reaction is pure dread, which is funny because it's so honest. His comparison of his high school ex's Facebook statuses about parenthood being a nightmare is a good bit of observational humor. He knows he's not cut out for this, and the show acknowledges it, which is a small win. But then, the orchid incident. Oh, the orchid. This entire subplot is a perfect encapsulation of Peter's incompetence. He kills an orchid through sheer, unadulterated neglect disguised as care. Watering it every day, putting it in direct sun. It's like he actively tries to kill things. The doctor's visit, where he brushes his teeth with a grill brush because he lost his toothbrush years ago, is another example of his profound laziness and lack of basic life skills. He's not just a bad dad, he's a bad human. The scene with O'Malley and his wife Molly is a decent attempt at pathos, showing the struggles of trying to have kids. It's meant to be a sympathetic moment, but it's undercut by the fact that Peter is the one delivering the advice while being demonstratively unqualified. His invitation to hang out is a nice gesture, but his subsequent groan about making breakfast is so telling. He's already looking for the easiest way out. It's a small character beat, but it's so important. It shows us that beneath all the bluster, Peter is fundamentally lazy and selfish. And that's before he even starts taking care of the kids, which, as we'll see, is a whole other level of disaster. The morning after, Peter's attempt at taking care of the kids is, predictably, a train wreck. He gets Stewie and Brian changed, and they both yelp in pain. This is supposed to be funny, and the visual gag of the kids getting hurt is there, but it's also a little dark. Peter's justification, "I'm a dad, the only thing I know how to use is a shop vac," is a pretty bleak assessment of his parenting skills. It's funny because it's so true to his character, but it also makes you feel a little sorry for the kids. He's not malicious, he's just utterly incapable. The grenade in the lunch bag is a classic Peter Griffin move. He genuinely thinks it's a good idea to give his kid a grenade for lunch. The justification, "use it to get a better lunch," is so twisted. He's not thinking about safety, he's thinking about efficiency in his own messed up way. And of course, he got the wrong bag. This whole sequence is designed to show how much of a disaster he is, and it succeeds brilliantly.
It's chaotic, it's stupid, and it's exactly what you'd expect from Peter. The hashtag dance like a dad is a funny jab at the performative nature of parenting on social media, and Peter's waving to someone behind him is a nice little touch of his cluelessness. The sheer niceness he receives from everyone, the server at the coffee shop, the people he encounters, is where the episode really starts to get interesting. They're all so impressed by the super dad, who is clearly just floundering. This leads to the dead wife lie. And honestly, this is where Peter really goes off the rails. He tells the coffee shop server that Lois is dead to get a free blueberry muffin stuffed into a cup and drowned in coffee. It's a new low, even for him. The server's immediate sympathy and offer of pie is almost too easy. Peter, the master manipulator, has discovered the ultimate cheat code: pretend your wife is dead. And he doesn't hesitate to exploit it. He's not just getting a muffin, he's getting free pie, all because people feel sorry for him. The conversation about the whipped cream and Lois's supposed last words is a pathetic attempt to make the lie more believable, but it just comes across as him being completely detached and selfish. He's reveling in the pity. And when he cries about his dead wife, it's supposed to be funny, but it's also a little sad. He's so used to getting his way that he'll invent tragedies to achieve it. And the doctor's visit, where he's told he'll be laid up for a week, is a nice bit of ironic foreshadowing for his own upcoming immobility and the ensuing childcare chaos. The whole idea of him using Lois's injury as an excuse for his own incompetence and then exploiting the sympathy of others is peak Peter. It's a testament to his character that he can be so utterly awful and yet somehow still be the protagonist. It's this kind of grim, uncomfortable humor that defines the show. The scene where Peter talks to Quagmire and Joe is a classic Family Guy setup. They're sitting around, talking about their lives, and Peter is, of course, exploiting his situation. Quagmire and Joe, bless their hearts, are just trying to offer him some fatherly advice, but Peter is more interested in the free things he's getting. The whole idea that people see a dad alone with his kids as a hero, while a mom alone is a mess, is a pretty sharp observation about societal expectations. It's funny because it highlights the double standard, and it's even funnier because Peter is totally leaning into it.
He's not trying to be a good dad, he's trying to get free pie. And the whole Kirby mix-up with Stewie is a classic Family Guy gag that relies on misidentification and character ignorance. Joe thinks Stewie is a kid named Kirby, and Peter doesn't even correct him. It's a minor detail, but it's telling. Peter is so checked out, so focused on his own narrative, that he can't even keep track of his own child's name. This entire conversation solidifies Peter's character as someone who would rather manipulate the system than actually do the work. It's a cynical take on modern parenting culture, and it's delivered with the show's signature lack of subtlety. It's the kind of joke that makes you laugh and then immediately feel a little bit guilty for finding it funny. It's that sweet spot of Family Guy humor. Lois's injury leads to some truly uncomfortable moments, and the sponge bath scene is definitely one of them. Peter is tasked with caring for Lois while she's laid up, and it quickly devolves into something akin to a creepy caregiver-patient dynamic, which is exactly what he fears. The initial request for a sponge bath is innocent enough, but Peter's immediate jump to English patient type of thing and his fear of intimacy is hilarious. He's so uncomfortable with genuine human connection that he'd rather imagine a dramatic romance than deal with the reality of helping his wife. The leg hair reveal and the description of the smell is pure Family Guy gross-out humor. It's designed to shock and disgust, and it absolutely does. The whole 4 days of sweat and a dinner fork bit is vivid and awful. Peter's plea to be let go and Lois's subsequent bell ringing and demand for him to take out her waist is a brutal power dynamic reversal. She's turning the tables on him, making him endure the indignity of caregiving in the most unpleasant way possible. This scene is intentionally uncomfortable, and it works because it's so over the top. It's a twisted take on the caregiver role, and it's a stark contrast to the superficial super dad narrative he's peddling elsewhere.
It really drives home the idea that parenting and caregiving in general is hard, messy work, and Peter is not built for it. The diaper-changing scene with Aiden is another highlight of Peter's ineptitude. The music, Holding Out for a Hero, is perfectly chosen, ironically underscoring his complete failure to be any kind of hero. Aiden's "no biting Aiden" is a classic exasperated parent line. The joke about feeding him nothing but Chick-fil-A is a subtle dig at how parents sometimes rely on convenience food, and it explains the smell. It's a good callback to the earlier scenes. The arrival of Becky, the other single parent, is where the episode shifts gears again. Her genuine kindness and empathy towards Peter, seeing him as a struggling single dad, is the complete opposite of how he's actually behaving. She's offering him a playdate, suggesting lunch, and he's just there. The skylight bit, with Becky asking if it bites, is a sweet moment of innocence from her, and Peter's reaction is a mix of confusion and annoyance. He's so deep in his own manufactured drama that he can't even appreciate a genuine connection. His offer to keep the popcorn for themselves is a funny glimpse of his selfishness, but it's also a hint that he's starting to enjoy the attention from Becky. The episode is setting up a classic Family Guy scenario. Peter gets himself into a situation where he's pretending to be something he's not, and it's going to blow up in his face. The exhaustion she expresses about doing it alone resonates, and it's a stark contrast to Peter's faked hardship. The playdate turns into a full-blown attempt at a relationship, and this is where Peter's lies really start to unravel. Becky is clearly falling for the super dad, and Peter is enjoying the attention a little too much. He's lying about Lois being dead, he's lying about his life, and he's doing it all for some free pie and a bit of attention. The idea that they could make this a regular thing, taking the pressure off them, is a nice thought, but it's built on a foundation of deceit. And when Becky's son, TJ, asks about his mom, the conversation quickly shifts to the late husband, Scott. The yawn from Becky is a subtle but effective way to show her exhaustion and loneliness. It's a nice moment of vulnerability that Peter completely misses. The mention of the pet cloud and Peter mistaking it for a skylight is a moment of genuine visual humor, showing the disconnect between their realities. His question about it coming back highlights his lack of understanding of basic things. The moment where the fly buzzes around and Peter can't swat it, only for Lois to ask for help and discover the drawer full of sex toys, is peak Family Guy absurdity. It's a classic bait and switch, and it adds to the overall sense of chaos and dysfunction in the Griffin household. It's these little moments of accidental humor that really sell the show's chaotic energy. Peter's confession to Becky is where the episode really pivots. He admits that lying about Lois being dead to eat popcorn wasn't the best idea. This is a moment of slight self-awareness, but it's immediately followed by him considering the full scumbag route. The advice from Quagmire about the scumbag starter kit is hilariously specific and cynical. The idea that golf was invented for cheating husbands is a funny, if a bit cliché, observation. Peter's justification for hanging out with Becky, to help with Stewie, is his flimsy excuse for his own questionable behavior. He knows he crossed a line, and he knows he has to break it off. But he's doing it because he doesn't want Lois to find out, not because it's the right thing to do. His glasses, Kirby Parker's, are another callback, and the gif of Forrest Gump is a perfect, awkward goodbye. It's a visual that screams, "I'm trying to be gentle, but also, I'm a total loser." The doorbell ringing and Becky's surprise visit is the inevitable consequence of his actions. She's clearly not ready to let go, and Peter is caught. It's a classic sitcom setup, but with Family Guy's signature edge. The dog being very close to being put down is a dark joke that mirrors Peter's own fabricated situation. The Mom 2 nickname is a funny, if a little sad, indication of the kids' evolving family dynamics. The arrival of Lois, feeling better and coming downstairs, is the ticking clock for Peter's lies. He's caught between Becky, his kids, and his increasingly suspicious wife. The fake delivery order from the place Lois hates is a pathetic attempt to maintain the illusion. And Brian's discussion of the Electoral College is a classic Family Guy non sequitur, used to distract Lois. Peter's desperate attempt to keep her from coming downstairs, "Trust me, you don't want to go downstairs," is a moment of pure panic. The bell ringing again and the arrival of someone with boner and butt pill is the ultimate punchline to this whole ridiculous charade. It's a chaotic, messy, and thoroughly predictable ending for a Family Guy episode. It perfectly encapsulates the show's brand of humor, escalating absurdity, selfish characters, and a complete lack of meaningful consequence for the main protagonist. It's a fittingly messy conclusion, leaving you with a sense of what was the point, but also a grudging admiration for the sheer audacity of it all. The episode, for all its flaws, does manage to be consistently funny, even if the humor is often dark or uncomfortable. It's the kind of episode that makes you question your own sense of humor, and that's probably the best you can hope for with this show.
So, what did we learn here? We learned that Peter Griffin is in fact a terrible father. We learned that playing old video games can be a source of immense conflict. We learned that pretending your wife is dead is a great way to get free food. And we learned that the world is a confusing place, where single dads are seen as heroes and moms are seen as messes, at least in Joe's opinion. The episode's exploration of parenting is shallow, but it does touch on the exhaustion and the societal expectations surrounding it. Peter's journey from clueless dad to manipulative liar to nearly getting caught is a roller coaster of bad decisions. The show, as usual, doesn't offer any real solutions or lessons, just a series of jokes and uncomfortable situations. It's the Family Guy way. It's a show that thrives on its characters' worst impulses, and this episode is no exception. Peter's ability to lie and exploit others, even for something as simple as free pie, is his defining characteristic. And the episode leans into that, for better or worse. It's a fun ride, even if it's a morally bankrupt one. Let's talk about the writing and pacing. The episode feels a bit like two separate episodes stitched together. You have the Donkey Kong segment at the beginning, which feels like a self-contained bit, and then the main plot about Peter taking care of the kids. They do eventually connect, in the sense that Peter's general incompetence is the through line, but it's not a seamless blend. The jokes are hit or miss. Some land really well, like the grill brush toothbrushing or the description of Lois's leg smell. Others feel like they're trying too hard, like some of the political humor that doesn't quite land. The pacing is typical Family Guy. It moves quickly, throwing jokes at you constantly. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it feels like they're rushing through a plot point to get to the next gag. The character moments, like O'Malley's wife, feel a little tacked on, like they needed a moment of fake emotion to contrast with the absurdity. It's not a tightly written episode, but it's got enough funny moments to keep you engaged. The pacing doesn't allow for much character development, but that's par for the course with Family Guy. It's more about the gags than the substance. And honestly, for this show, that's usually for the best. Trying to find deep meaning in a Family Guy episode is like trying to find a single vegetable in Peter's diet. A noble effort, but ultimately futile. The visual execution is pretty standard. There are moments of visual flair, like the Donkey Kong house reconstruction, but for the most part, it's the usual animation style. Nothing jumped out at me as particularly innovative or lazy. The character designs are consistent, the backgrounds are detailed enough. The pacing of the animation, especially during action sequences or moments of shock, is typical for the show. They do a decent job of conveying the chaos and Peter's ineptitude visually. The facial expressions are on point, especially when Peter is panicking or trying to look innocent. The animation serves the jokes in the story effectively, but it's not something that's going to win any awards on its own. It's functional, not groundbreaking. The direction is competent, guiding the viewer through the various plot threads without getting too bogged down. The show has a formula for directing its episodes, and they stick to it. It's reliable, if a little predictable. The sound design is also typical, with the iconic theme song and the usual sound effects. Nothing to write home about, but it adds to the overall Family Guy experience. Overall, the episode is visually competent, but it doesn't offer anything new or exciting in terms of animation or direction. My personal verdict on this episode? It's a solid 6 out of 10. It's got some funny moments, a few clever observations, and it stays within the bounds of what Family Guy typically offers. But it also feels a little lazy, a little disjointed, and ultimately forgettable. It's an episode that exists, and that's about it. It doesn't push the show forward, it doesn't offer any groundbreaking commentary, and it doesn't leave a lasting impression. It's a standard, middle-of-the-road Family Guy episode that fills a slot in the season. It's not a must-watch, but if you're a diehard fan, you won't hate it. It's more of a turn-your-brain-off-and-giggle kind of episode, and that's okay, I guess. It's the kind of thing that makes you appreciate the older seasons more, where there was a bit more bite. But for what it is, it's not terrible. Now, let's get into some specific moments that really stood out. First off, the initial Donkey Kong rant. Peter's absolute fury that Chris doesn't like this game is a masterclass in irrational anger. He's not just disappointed, he's personally offended. He goes on this tangent about how it's the greatest game ever, and Chris is just sitting there, completely unmoved, saying, "This game sucks." The fact that Peter's argument is entirely based on his own outdated nostalgia, and he can't even conceive of someone not liking it, is hilarious.
He's so invested in his own subjective experience that he completely dismisses Chris's. It's like he's auditioning for a role as the world's worst retro gamer reviewer. He's not trying to understand Chris, he's trying to convert him. I love the visual of Chris just looking utterly bored while Peter is having a full-blown existential crisis over pixels. What this moment is trying to say is pretty clear. Generational differences are a thing, and Peter is utterly incapable of bridging them. He's stuck in his own past. My version? I would have had Chris actually articulate why he thinks Donkey Kong sucks, giving Peter a chance to respond to actual points, however poorly. Instead, it's just a one-sided rant. It's funny, but it's a bit of a missed opportunity for actual comedic dialogue. I'd have him say something like, "Dad, it's literally just jumping and moving left and right. There's no story, no character development, and the graphics look like they were drawn on a potato." That would have given Peter more to react to than just, "It sucks." It's a small change, but it would have made the exchange more dynamic. It's a moment that perfectly sets up Peter's inherent selfishness and his inability to connect with his kids on their level. He's not interested in their world, he's interested in forcing them into his. The Lost Orchid subplot is another gem of Peter's incompetence. The scene where he's talking to O'Malley and his wife Molly is supposed to be empathetic, showing their struggle to conceive, but it's Peter who's the focus. His explanation of how he killed their orchid is horrifically casual. "Every day, I thought water was good." And the absolute horror of O'Malley realizing he put it in a western-facing window, calling Peter a monster, is just perfect. It's this little moment of genuine pathos amidst the chaos, and it's all because Peter is fundamentally incapable of basic care. He's not just bad at parenting, he's bad at life. This scene works because it's so relatable in its depiction of someone failing at something simple. We've all had plans die on us, but Peter takes it to a whole new level. What it's trying to say is that Peter's neglect isn't just about the kids, it's a systemic issue with his personality. He's just bad at keeping things alive. My take? I'd have made Peter's care even more ridiculous. Maybe he tried to feed the orchid pizza, or he gave it a tiny sweater, something that shows a complete misunderstanding of what a plant is.
And O'Malley's reaction could have been even more extreme, like fainting. It's funny because it highlights the absurdity of Peter's incompetence. It's a moment that's both sad and hilarious, and it perfectly sets up his struggles with actual children. He can't even keep a plant alive, but he's supposed to be a dad. It's a testament to the show's ability to find humor in human failure. The introduction of the dead Y-fly is a pivotal moment, and the coffee shop scene is where it truly blossoms. Peter's request for the server to stuff a blueberry muffin into a cup and pour coffee all over it is already absurd, but it's his immediate pivot to pretending Lois is dead that elevates it. The server's quick sympathy and the offer of free pie is almost too easy, and Peter laps it up. He's not even trying to hide it, he's actively exploiting it. The subsequent crying about his wife's supposed last words and the specific detail about whipped cream is darkly funny. He's not just getting a free meal, he's getting an emotional handout. It works because it's so outrageous and so in character for Peter. He's the ultimate opportunist, and this is him finding the ultimate loophole. What it's trying to say is that society is often too quick to offer pity and freebies to those who appear to be suffering, and Peter is the perfect person to exploit that. He's not interested in genuine connection. He's interested in what he can get out of people. My version? I would have made the server even more enthusiastic with their sympathy, perhaps offering him a lifetime supply of free pie. Or maybe other patrons would start donating money to his grief fund. This would have amplified the absurdity of Peter's lie and the gullibility of the people around him. It's a moment that perfectly encapsulates Peter's character, selfish, manipulative, and utterly shameless. He's the master of the fake sob story, and the show always delivers him the perfect audience. The scene where Peter is taking care of Lois after her injury is frankly uncomfortable. The bell ringing and Lois's demand for him to take out her waist is a harsh reality check. His fear of the English patient dynamic is palpable, and the visual of his reaction to Lois's hairy leg is pure gross-out humor. The description of the smell, 4 days of sweat and a dinner fork that got stuck when I scratched my ankle, is incredibly vivid and disgusting. This moment works because it's so visceral. It's designed to make you squirm, and it absolutely succeeds. It's a stark contrast to the super dad narrative he's been peddling. What it's trying to say is that caregiving is not glamorous, and Peter is utterly unprepared for the unglamorous reality. He wants the accolades of being a dad, but he doesn't want the actual work. My version? I'd have leaned even harder into the bodily fluids. Maybe Lois has a fever and is delirious, mistaking Peter for someone else, leading to even more awkward and disgusting scenarios.
Or perhaps Peter has to deal with a bedpan in a way that's truly horrifying. It's a moment that's designed to be uncomfortable, and the more uncomfortable it is, the better it serves its purpose. It's a brutal reminder that sometimes the people we love the most can put us in the most compromising and unpleasant situations, and Peter's reaction is a comedic goldmine. The playdate with Becky and her son TJ is where the episode starts to feel like a classic sitcom setup, albeit with Family Guy's signature dark twist. Becky's genuine kindness towards Peter, mistaking his fumbling for fatherly dedication, is sweet. She sees him as a struggling single dad, and he's playing the part perfectly, all for free pie. The joke about the skylight being a pet cloud is a nice moment of innocence from TJ that Peter completely misses. He's so caught up in his own charade that he can't appreciate these simple, genuine interactions. This moment works because it highlights the contrast between Peter's manufactured reality and Becky's genuine one. It's a setup for disaster, and we know it. What it's trying to say is that Peter is so isolated in his own ego that he can't recognize authentic connection when it's staring him in the face. He's looking for validation, not companionship. My version? I'd have made Peter even more oblivious. Maybe he tries to explain to TJ that clouds are just water vapor and that he needs to get over his imaginary friend, completely ruining the child's innocent moment. This would have amplified Peter's insensitivity and his inability to connect with children on their level. It's a classic Family Guy move. Take a sweet moment and twist it into something a little sad and a lot funny. The reveal of the sex toy drawers is a classic Family Guy moment of unexpected absurdity. Lois needs the Apple TV remote, and Peter, still stuck in bed, offers to fetch it. His immediate thought is to compare the situation to The English Patient, revealing his warped perception of intimacy and caregiving. Lois's calm request for the remote is met with Peter's escalating panic. When he hands it to her, their fingers touch, and Peter's mind immediately goes to a romantic place, which is promptly shut down by the horrifying reality of the drawers. The fact that there are multiple drawers filled with sex toys and Peter can't even locate a simple fly swatter without stumbling upon them is a testament to the chaotic and, frankly, slightly disturbing nature of the Griffin household. This scene works because it's a perfect blend of mundane request and outrageous reveal. It's a moment of pure, unadulterated Family Guy randomness. What it's trying to say is that the Griffin household is a place of hidden secrets and questionable hobbies. It's a joke that relies on shock value and the sheer unexpectedness of it all. My version? I'd have had one of the sex toys actually do something. Maybe it makes a noise or it lights up. Something that adds another layer of bizarre absurdity to the situation. It's a moment that's designed to be a laugh-out-loud gag, and it succeeds by being so completely unexpected. It's these moments of pure, unadulterated weirdness that make Family Guy, well, Family Guy. The final scene, with Becky showing up unannounced and Peter's ensuing panic, is the classic sitcom climax. He's been caught, and now he has to deal with the fallout. His attempts to hide Becky from Lois, using Brian's discourse on the Electoral College as a distraction, is a desperate and futile effort. The doorbell ringing again, followed by the arrival of someone delivering boner and butt pill, is the perfect chaotic punchline. It's a messy, nonsensical ending that ties up loose ends in the most Family Guy way possible. This moment works because it's the culmination of all the lies and manipulations. It's the inevitable crash and burn. What it's trying to say is that Peter's lies always catch up to him, but he rarely learns from them. He'll get away with it this time, but he'll probably do something even dumber next week. My version? I'd have made the pills even more specific and ridiculous, something like boner and butt pill, recommended dosage 1 per cheek. It's a small detail, but it adds to the overall absurdity. The episode ends with a bang, or rather a series of increasingly loud and nonsensical bangs. It's a chaotic, hilarious, and deeply flawed conclusion that perfectly encapsulates the essence of Family Guy. It's the kind of ending that makes you laugh and then immediately feel a little bit dirty, and that's exactly what the show aims for.
It's the culmination of Peter's bad decisions, all crashing down on him in the most spectacular fashion possible. Now, let's check in on our main players. Peter, as expected, is the driving force behind all the chaos. In this episode, he's not just incompetent, he's actively manipulative, using Lois's injury to gain sympathy and freebies. His best moment is arguably his utter meltdown over Donkey Kong, where his irrational anger is peak Peter. He's used well here, as the entire episode revolves around his failures and questionable choices. This episode doesn't necessarily change how I see him, but it reinforces his established character as a selfish idiot who occasionally stumbles into good intentions, but always messes it up. The show seems to be leaning into his worst traits, which can be funny but also a bit tiresome. He's still the same Peter, just navigating a new, self-inflicted crisis. Lois,
unfortunately, is sidelined for much of the episode due to her injury. Her best moment is probably her taking control during Peter's caregiving and forcing him to deal with the unpleasant realities of it, especially with the bell and the waste removal. She's used more as a plot device to get Peter into trouble than as a fully fleshed out character here. Her role in this episode doesn't really change my perception of her, as she's largely reactive to Peter's idiocy. She's the exasperated voice of reason who is constantly undermined. Stewie and Brian are mostly there to react to Peter's incompetence or to participate in his absurd schemes, like Stewie being dressed as a damsel. Stewie's participation in the Donkey Kong house is his most notable moment, showcasing his willingness to go along with Peter's madness. Brian is mostly just there, offering some dry commentary. They're used well enough to serve the plot, but they don't have significant arcs in this particular episode. Their roles are functional, designed to highlight Peter's failures. Chris is once again the voice of reason, or at least the voice of normalcy, in his rejection of Donkey Kong. His disdain for the game is his best moment, as it's the catalyst for Peter's initial meltdown. He's used well as the foil to Peter's irrationality. This episode doesn't change my view of Chris. He's consistently the most sensible of the Griffin kids, which isn't saying much. Meg is barely a factor here. She's given the line, "Meg, the boys need the room," which is about all the attention she gets. She's used to fill space and prompt Peter's initial reaction, and that's about it.
Her character is so consistently sidelined that it's almost impressive. Her role here is purely functional, a brief interruption before the main story kicks off. Joe and Quagmire are, of course, there to offer Peter terrible advice and commentary. Joe's